Because of the incessant, repeated use of Roundup year in, year out since the introduction of GMOs, the American fields are now absolutely rampant with Roundup-resistant weeds. And the only way that farmers are now trying to control this is by mixing other, even more toxic herbicides in their tanks, along with the glyphosate, such as 2,4-D and dicamba. So now the population is going to get exposed to not just the Roundup in large amounts, but an ever-increasing amount of 2,4-D and dicamba. The consequences of ingesting this mixture are totally unknown because it's never been evaluated. And it's going to get worse because companies like DuPont, Dow, and Monsanto have released crop varieties that are not only resistant to glyphosate, but also to dicamba or to 2,4-D.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 75, Dr. Michael Antoniou, PhD, The Lies Behind GMO Foods. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power. So tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hey Vidal Speakers, how are you today? Welcome back to another Wednesday. I have a long one for you today, but a great one. I can't wait for you guys to hear my guest. His name is Dr. Michael Antoniou. Today's episode is a bit sad because you're going to learn just what a disaster our food system really is and how we're being slowly poisoned so they can fill their pockets with billions of dollars. Dr. Michael is going to talk to us about his long research project that he did on the impact of GMO corn and the real risks behind GMO foods. It used to be that I was so shocked when I'd hear about a young person in their 50s or 60s getting diagnosed with a horrible disease. But honestly, rather than being shocked anymore, I feel much more amazed that the body could live 60 years with all this exposure to these poisons on a daily basis. But who would have thought that our food would become our slow poison? Yes, that's the case today. Sadly, our food is slowly killing us. And if you add mercury in the picture, it's kind of one more miracle that we could live 50 or 60 years just with these two things alone. And that's not counting any stress or lifestyle choices or diet, nothing. I honestly believe one day in thousands of years in the future, whoever's inhibiting the earth, and probably at the rate we're going, it won't be humans. But anyway, they're going to look back and they're going to go, wow, mercury, glyphosates, and GMO foods, those were the real disasters that took the world down. And I truly believe that. I'm not joking. I think these are going to be really the disasters of our lifetime. There's so much to health already. But when we have no way to avoid mercury filling our brains and organs, and we have no way to avoid getting glyphosate since they're in everything from food to vaccinations, medicine, and even our air, then it begins to feel like we're getting slowly poisoned. This makes me so angry, really. But I think if you guys are regular listeners, you know by now that you can only take responsibility for your own health. So you need to learn everything you can, and that's why I'm doing this show. There are so many lies out there. Most of them, they come from the industry that's profiting. Of course they're going to lie and tell you something's safe and that there's no evidence, even though they've seen studies to show all the dangers. They need your dollar to make them billionaires. Of course they're going to lie. So, as I always tell you, you vote with your dollar. If you really want to help get rid of GMO foods, then don't buy any. Because what would happen if for 1 month everyone stopped buying GMO foods? They'd try to sell it probably to other countries, but you know what? Other countries' restrictions are so much tighter than ours when it comes to GMO foods, so they wouldn't buy them, and sooner or later they'd have to grow what we want, or they're just going to lose. So just because it feels sad or depressing or it makes you angry, don't just hide from the issue. Vote with your dollar and spread the word to everyone you know to avoid GMO foods. You can't believe that line that the food or chemical is safe when the study's being funded by the very company that manufactures the food or chemical. You get that by now, right? Did you know that many industry studies, such as the safety studies on pesticides and GMOs, are not peer-reviewed or published, and therefore they lack any external scrutiny outside the regulatory bodies that consider the application for authorization? The industry studies on pesticides are kept secret under commercial confidentiality rules. Thus, there's no way for concerned citizens like ourselves or even independent scientists to verify that the regulators who reviewed the data on the pesticide made the right decision in approving it for commercial use. So you're just having to believe them in blind faith without any proof, without you getting to see any of the studies, without them being peer-reviewed. That's crazy, isn't it? Now, let me tell you about some of the myths behind GMO foods, and hopefully you'll get all the truths in my interview today with Dr. Antoniou. Myth number 1, GMOs are an extension of natural breeding and they do not pose different risks from natural bred crops. Lie. Myth number 2, GMOs are safe to eat and can be more nutritious than naturally bred crops. Lie. Myth number 3, GMOs are strictly regulated for safety. Lie. Myth number 4, GMOs increase yields. Lie. Myth number 5, GMOs reduce pesticides use. Lie, now we're using more than ever. Myth number 6, GMOs benefit farmers and make their lives easier. Lie, but that's how they passed that law in California to not label GMOs because that was the commercial they ran. Myth number 7, GMOs bring economic benefits. Lie. Myth number 8, GMOs benefit the environment. Big lie. Myth number 9, GMOs can help solve problems caused by climate change. Big lie. Myth number 10, GMOs can reduce energy use. Big lie. And lastly, myth number 11, GMOs will help feed the world. This is one that many people actually thought that would be the benefit of a GMO crop. But if you do your research, even just go on the internet and Google a woman by the name of Vandana Shiva, and you'll be able to watch probably a bunch of YouTubes on her, and she'll tell you the truth about that myth. Okay, here's a question. Did you guys know that glyphosate, which is mostly known as Roundup, of course, did you know that it's the world's most used pesticide? So knowing that, you can imagine just how crazy our exposure is. Remember when I had Stephanie Seneff on the show and she talked about how it was in everything and that it was the single most destructive molecule on Earth? Well, imagine we're eating this in our food. It's being sprayed on our food. It's being built into our DNA of our seeds. I mean, it's just absolutely insane what we're doing to the human body with this chemical called glyphosate. And if you're interested in going back and re-listening to the episodes of Stephanie Seneff, it's episode 40 and 41. And if you haven't checked that out, please do so because it's really a great interview. Also, I want you guys to always remember that almost all soy is grown to tolerate glyphosate. So that's why if you ever eat soy, you must buy organic. And that's why when I eat out, I usually don't order anything with soy unless it's a restaurant that I don't have any other choice. But if I go to an organic restaurant, then I have no problem eating soy. Did you know that North America has the highest level of glyphosates in their foods? Well, you're going to hear Dr. Michael tell us today that the levels that they claim are safe have been wrongly set way too high. So the fact that we're over these levels means we're actually way over the level. How sad is that? And listen to this one. The acceptable daily levels set for the EU are 0.3 milligrams per kilogram per day. So that means 0.3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day. And for China and Russia, it's 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight per day. And for the USA, it's 1.75 milligrams per kilogram of body weight per day. So what does that tell you? I think it tells you which of those countries has more financial interest in glyphosates, don't you? That's so sad, though. Think of this. We allow the level to be almost 6 times more in the US than in the EU. Geez, that's horrible. Especially when the poor and the sick are the ones needing to eat these cheap fast foods, and they're all filled with GMOs. Although if you're eating any animals when you eat out, you're also getting filled with glyphosates because that animal was likely raised in a factory farm and they're fed GMO corn and soy. And even if they claim it's grass-fed, that animal spends its last months before slaughter at the feedlot, and they're fed the same crap diet as all the other animals are fed. That's why it's really important to eat organic and try as best as you can to avoid glyphosate-filled, DNA-damaged, toxic GMO foods. Don't you love that? I love that. Glyphosate-filled, DNA-damaged, toxic GMO foods. I should coin that phrase. Oh my God, though, what happened to our world? What happened to the idea of eating real food, you guys? This subject saddens me so much. It's really hard to watch how the money-hungry companies are just filling their pockets with profits, and we're their rats. I would bet a lot of money that the CEOs are not eating any of that GMO food once they've seen the real studies, but they're going to tell you they're safe. Okay, I just better get off this tangent now. We better get speaking to Dr. Michael. I want you to learn the truth today, so from today on, you will be committed to eat organic, and you'll know now why it's so important. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Michael Antoniou. Michael Antoniou, PhD, is a reader in molecular genetics and head gene expression and therapy group at King's College London School of Medicine, of course in London, UK. He has 28 years' experience in the use of genetic engineering technology investigating gene organization and control with over 40 peer-reviewed publications of original work, and holds inventor status on a number of gene expression biotechnology patents. Dr. Michael Antoniou has a large network of collaborators in the industry and academia who are making use of his discoveries in gene control mechanisms for the production of research, diagnostic and therapeutic products, and human somatic gene therapies for inherited and acquired genetic disorders. Whew, now that's seriously a complex bio, you guys. Geez, thank God for people with brains that are able to do this kind of work. We're so lucky to have their research, and today we're so lucky to have Dr. Michael Antoniou say yes to come speak with us on the Vidal Speaks podcast, and he's going to teach us all now about the truths to GMO foods. So without further delay, let's go meet Dr. Antoniou. Sit back, but you won't be able to relax while listening to this one. And if you have one of those armchair dolls, you know, the ones that you throw when you're angry, go get it because you're likely going to need it. Oh, this is crazy, but you'll see what I mean when you hear this one. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Welcome to the Vidal Speaks podcast, Dr. Antoniou, and I have read your work and I so look forward to sharing your research on the health implications of GMO corn with my listeners. But I also have a personal interest in this subject because as an 11-year LPGA professional golfer, I was exposed to so much Roundup. So I look forward to hearing from you today, and thank you for joining me.
It really is a pleasure and an honor, Deborah, to be on this interview and program with you. So I've been looking forward to this as well for quite some time, and I'm glad we finally got together for it.
Yeah, you're a busy man, but I so appreciate you saying yes, because this is such an important subject. And really, I can't tell you how sad it makes me to learn all this stuff, but I've known about it for a while, but your research has gone so deep, and that's why I really wanted to get you on the show. And maybe we need to start by saying, what is a molecular geneticist and what kind of work do they do? Because that's what you do, right?
Yes, indeed. A molecular geneticist like myself, historically at least, what we do is we study the organization and control of genes within our favorite system, favorite animal, human. And on that basis, in my case as well, by the discoveries that we make in terms of the elements in DNA that are controlling whether a gene is switched on or off. And what I mean by a gene being switched on or off is whether the genetic information that it has, the information for the protein or the RNA, it's being manufactured from the gene. Mm-hmm. And each gene carries its own set of control elements that switch it on. And if they switch it on, at what level? There's a fine tuning to the on-off process as well. And the identification of genes and their control elements is not only academically interesting, but it has practical applications, because one of the things that I have done with my own discoveries in the control of, say, muscle genes and what are known as housekeeping genes, these are genes that are functioning everywhere within our body in all cell types, is that I've been able to design gene cassettes that could be used in either a gene therapy, gene medicine context, or in an industrial manufacturing context where valuable therapeutic proteins can be made more easily and more cost effectively, including, for example, antibodies that are seeing a great deal of therapeutic use these days.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess maybe I did. I never thought of it like that. When a gene turns on, it can kind of turn on a lower volume or on a full volume, kind of like a volume on our television. So it can turn on a little or turn on a lot. And that's quite interesting. But we also know that you can have a bad gene and it not turn on at all. So that's also good.
Yes, that's true. I don't think people realize just how important the control of gene function is. But the analogy or the point of fact that I use to illustrate this is that we carry the totality of the genes that we inherit from our parents. We carry that totality of DNA and all that genetic information in every single cell of our body, barring one or two specialist examples. That means the cell in your skin not only has the information for making skin, but it carries information for making all the other structures in the body as well. It's like the whole is structured in every part. But of course, you don't want the genes that need to be turned on to make your liver to be working in your skin, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So all these wonderful control mechanisms have evolved to make sure that any given gene is turned on in the right place, the right time, and in the right quantity to ensure a healthy functioning of every system in our body. And when there's a breakdown in this control, the consequences, depending on which gene function has been disturbed, the consequences can be catastrophic. You only need one crucial gene function to be mutated and not to turn on at all, and you could have a serious disease. You can have disturbances in the patterns of gene function, and they can lead to cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodevelopmental problems, and behavioral problems. So it comes. So in other words, your genes may be fine in terms of their DNA sequence. There may be no damage there at all on many occasions. But if their control has gone awry, has become defective, then the patterns of gene function can be disturbed in such a way that they can lead to serious disease.
And I think that's why so many people are now studying epigenetics, like how lifestyle, because I'm a homeopath, and we've interviewed a lot of people who have talked about how epigenetics is really important, like living a good lifestyle can help support that your genes, all stay functioning correctly or turned off, the ones that need to. Do you think that this field is growing because of that reason?
I do believe, and I couldn't agree more with what you said, Deborah, just then. What the epigenetics, we do a little bit of that research in my lab at the moment and hope to expand on it. One of the most exciting developments in molecular genetics in recent years has been that the epigenetics, let me just define that since we got onto this very interesting topic. Epigenetics means above genetics or on genetics. Epi means above. Mm-hmm. And literally what we have in epigenetics are layers of molecular structures that literally sit on the genetics, sit on the DNA, and they control the function of the underlying genetics, the global patterns of gene function, which genes are turned on or off and to what level. And these epigenetic layers of control that are their unique patterns in every different cell type, every different tissue type in our body, are responsive not only to internal cues, but most importantly, external inputs as well. External inputs such as what we eat, behavior patterns, lifestyle, chemical pollutants, in the environment,
right?
Emotional, emotional status, how happy we are. These have been found to influence the epigenetic layers of control of our genes for better or worse.
Exactly. And, as a healthcare practitioner for a long time, I've been always saying there's no one thing. It's not just homeopathy. It's not only diet, although diet has a large role because we eat 3 meals a day. But it's not only environmental toxins, but that's becoming a bigger and bigger burden. So to me, I always feel like health is a pie, and each piece has a hole in the health of a person: sleeping, exercise, detoxing, eating right, living a good lifestyle where you're happy, where you have a passion, lower stress level. As you said, they're all important. And that's a lot of why I have this show, to help people not only take responsibility for their own health, but to hear the experts on how they can do that. I happen to be a vegan. I've been a vegan, started out kind of vegetarian at the age of 10 because I loved animals. The more I learn your work, the more happy I am a vegan, my gosh. And we'll get into that. But it's just, it's been on record and now scientific research that eating organic, whole food, plant-based diet can really help with the epigenetics and keeping cancer away and certain diseases. But it's also sleeping and being happy and playing and having friends. And there's so much to it. So I'm really happy to hear from a genetic specialist that is true, because that's what I say all the time on the show.
It is. It's absolutely true. And when I lecture to the medical students on this topic, I like to also emphasize that unlike the genetics that we inherit, which is basically fixed, unless we pick up, although it can be mutated, we can ingest mutagens and the DNA can be damaged. But on the whole, what we inherit is fixed. The epigenetics is dynamic. It's responding all the time. So if for some reason we've had some bad habits and whatever in the past, and we've upset our epigenetics and we've ended up with a disease condition of one sort or another, it doesn't have to remain that way, because with appropriate holistic intervention programs, let's call it lifestyle medicine, for want of a better word, things that embrace all aspects of life. By introducing this kind of intervention in our life, we can reset the epigenetics. We can reset it back into balance, and by doing that, we rebalance the gene functions, and we can get back to health and happiness rather than illness and not so happy.
Yeah, the body's an amazing machine that it can repair itself, and it's also very amazing when you study like you're doing, just as you were saying, just each little code has to work. Oh, it's so complicated, and one little thing off. And when you get sick with something and you start doing research, you start going, oh my gosh, that one little hair of calcium can do that, and that one little cell can do that, or one thing going wrong. So that's why it's important to, have a good lifestyle and be healthy. But your research has been a lot on the subject of GMO corn. So I'd like to know how you even got into studying that subject, and then maybe you can also tell people, in case they don't know exactly what GMO is, what it is.
Yes, certainly. Obviously, historically, my interests have been in human gene systems, their control, and developing gene-based medicines. But when I heard about the development of GMO crops and foods, although I wasn't working in that area, and I haven't been developing them, I was concerned by what I was hearing, because I realized that the way the technology of genetic modification, genetic engineering was being portrayed in an agricultural context, based on my own experience, because I use genetic engineering technology every day. My research group, it's our bread and butter technology that we use to study gene structure and function and developing gene-based medicines. So I know its strengths and its weaknesses. And the way that it was being portrayed within a crop development context just didn't match up to the reality that I knew, it really consisted of. It was being portrayed as something very precise and very predictable, and there was therefore no safety concerns whatsoever. But I knew that moving genes, what genetic engineering allows you to do is to cross species barriers. We know that under normal circumstances, genetic material can only be exchanged between closely related organisms within the same family, species. So, you can, a dog can mate with a cat. Sorry, a dog can mate with a dog, but a dog can't mate with a cat. And a strawberry can breed with strawberries. You can cross-pollinate strawberries with strawberries, but you can't cross-pollinate strawberries with potatoes, and vice versa. And that's because there are strict species barriers that preserve genetic integrity. And we've already discussed, in a way, touched on just how important genetic integrity and function is in order to preserve health of an organism. But in genetic engineering of crops to generate GMO foods, what's happening, and certainly everything that's out there on the market at the moment, genes have been moved from completely different organisms into the food supply. And this again goes completely against how we understand genes to exist and to function. No gene works in isolation. It works as part of an integrated whole. within an organism. The context of a gene is just as important as the information it carries. It's part of its identity. But with genetic engineering, you're taking, say, a gene from a bacterium and you're moving it into a crop. Or you can take a gene from an animal. You can take a gene from a potato and move it into strawberries. You can take a gene from a fish and move it into potatoes or strawberries. There are no holds barred, as I like to say, in the gene transfer.
Wow, that's scary.
It is, because you end up with combinations of genes that haven't evolved to work in a harmonious context together. You're introducing new gene functions. And in addition to that, what again was being ignored, and is still largely ignored by industry and regulators, is the DNA damaging effect of the genetic engineering process itself. It causes damage. The transfer of the foreign gene into the DNA of the crop, it damages it in hundreds or thousands of locations. And so we're doing two things are happening. You're bringing about new combinations of gene functions that have never evolved to work together properly. And secondly, you're damaging the DNA of the plant as well. So these combine to disturb the biochemistry of the plant. This, because remember, the biochemistry of the plant is dictated by the patterns of gene function. So if you're disturbing the gene functions, you're disturbing the biochemistry. And if you disturb the biochemistry, you can inadvertently produce new toxins and new allergies, or alter the nutritional profile of the plant. And there is evidence to show that all three of these things can actually happen in the development of a GMO crop.
So if I understand this correctly, you're saying that the actual process of the modification, bringing a species from something into another, is damaging already to the DNA. So that's one problem. But another problem is that those now genes that have been brought together no longer can work in an integrative way because they weren't ever meant to be together.
That's right.
So I would like to know, how does that not working together, how would that have implications on our human health in addition to the plant itself?
The implications for human health are that the genetic engineering process as a whole has an inherent unpredictable component, because you don't know what gene functions you're going to be disturbing. And therefore, you run this risk of producing a novel toxin or a novel allergen, something that will cause allergic reactions, which before the plant would have been fine, but now you've disturbed its composition so that now it's producing something that somebody could be allergic to, or or a new toxin, some new toxic substance can be produced. This is quite within the realms of possibility, which is why I've always advocated that GM foods should be very, very strictly regulated, if we want them at all, and that's another question.
Right.
Because actually, when you look around, they're actually not needed at all.
Right, and there's a lot of now research that shows that they aren't producing more food, and lots of people are showing how it's not what they thought it would do. So
that's right. The GMOs, foods, crops have failed to deliver on every one of the promises made by industry when they launched them in the mid-90s. None of their promises have materialized. Higher pesticides rather than lower pesticide use. No higher yields, and in some cases even lower yields. So they haven't really helped at all. And over and above that, what they have, however, they've caused environmental damage, especially because of the escalating rather than decreasing use of pesticides, especially herbicides, weed killers such as Roundup, and which means that we as consumers are exposed to higher residue levels of these chemicals, and we're exposed to substances that weren't there, an integral part of our diet before, like the Bt insecticide protein that's been engineered into corn, for example.
Yeah, you talk about that a lot. Can we go into that deeper? So I'd like to know about those. I know I've heard you speak about the BT and some other things. So tell us more about that.
So basically, even to this day, there are only two major characteristics or traits, as we call them, that have been engineered into the vast majority, 99+% of the GMO crops that are out there at the moment. One of them is resistance to weed killers, and especially the weed killer Roundup, glyphosate-based herbicide. And the other trait is an insecticide protein called Bt toxin. Bt toxin is found normally, naturally, in certain types of soil bacteria. And certain varieties of this Bt toxin are known to have what are known as selective insecticidal properties. That is to say, they will kill certain types of insects, whereas not harm others. Mm-hmm. So the genes for these insecticidal Bt toxins have been engineered into various crops, including corn and canola and cotton. And so, but the way in which they've been engineered into the crop is not, they are variants, they're not identical to what's the way they exist in the bacterium. They've been engineered in such a way to be what we call constitutively active. You know, there's no control over their function. And they lose their specificity. They're now indiscriminate to a large degree as to what insects will be affected by them or not. But of course, that's an environmental concern. But now, but we are going to be ingesting these Bt toxins as well. Bt toxin, we're going to be ingesting the Bt toxins in a form and in a quantity that has never been there, an integral part of the human diet before. What can be the consequences? Well, it's known that Bt toxins are powerful immunogens. What do I mean by that is they will cause a profound immune reaction to them. Our immune system will react to Bt toxins very profoundly. This, for me, runs the risk of developing an allergy towards Bt toxins. Mm-hmm. They may also have implications for our gut, the lining of our intestines, because Bt toxins, the way they affect, the way they bring about the death of pests on crops, is that they punch holes in the gut of the insects, the larvae, you know, the caterpillars that are eating your cabbage, for example. They will punch holes in the gut of the caterpillar. And as a result, bacteria from the gut go into the body of the caterpillar, they multiply, and they die from a massive bacterial infection. Now, I'm not saying that necessarily will happen to us, but there could be implications for the integrity of our gut. These are things that need to be explored carefully, because people have reported at least allergic reactions. There have been case reports that I have come across where people have reported allergic reactions to consuming corn products which have been made from GMO Bt corn.
Right. And I think you coming from a professor and totally science and research based, and me coming more from the health industry and listening to other people and clinical experience, I know for a fact that there was I think a doctor was here in LA, but it was somewhere in California, and he saw so many children with these severe gut issues, and he decided to do this this clinical research just on his own, where he just had every single one of the kids that moms were willing to do it. All he did was take them off at all GMO foods. He didn't do it wasn't, like changing their diet drastically. It was just making them eat organic, non-GMO foods. And the amount of improvement was astounding. And he wrote about it. And then, of course, Dr. Andrew Wakefield, now this is a little bit different topic because he's the English doctor that got ousted because of what he did in his research with the autistic kids. And as you know, many autistic kids also have horrible gut issues, but there's other reasons, of course, but they have very difficult guts. And if a child like that eats corn or GMO foods, it's going to be even more complicated. But there's other reasons for that with the vaccines and all the toxins in the vaccines, and in particular, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. But anyways, there's been people who have reported many, many more gut issues now today. There's, I'm sure, several reasons why, but a lot of people do believe that the GMO foods are contributing to this problem with our children and adults now having a lot more gut issues than we've ever seen before.
Yes, indeed. It's a very worrying state of affairs, to put it mildly, when it comes to the health of the American population. I've been horrified by the statistics that colleagues, including clinicians, have quoted me. Most shockingly is the fact that around 50% of American children have at least one chronic illness, many of them having more than one chronic illness. And the naturopath, doctors, clinicians that I know, like you've just mentioned, Deborah, is that they find that if they take these kids off the regular diet, the GMO, pesticide-laden diet, and move them onto organic diets, they invariably they get better. And so, yeah, there is something clearly wrong. There's probably multiple factors wrong with a conventional diet. My feeling is that, and I'm on record as saying this, but so I'll say it here as well, which is that I believe that the adoption of a chemical-based agriculture and augmented now with GMOs, which means that we are now ingesting, albeit in small quantities, of nevertheless tens, if not hundreds, of chemicals, many of them, from stemming from our food. I believe that our food has become like a slow poison. Mm-hmm. And so it's slow, so it's difficult to make the link. But we know that even low levels of pesticides, they can have endocrine disruptive effects. They potentially have gut microbiome, gut bacterial issues. They can cause gut bacterial issues. So in many ways for me, I'm not surprised that moving onto a whole food, organic diet, we will see improvements.
Well, and I honestly can say, if I had to put something on record, and if we can, go 1,000 years into the future, if we could even make it that far with where the environment is and our state of our food and our water. But let's just say, I think one day people will look back and they'll say, wow, mercury, the amount of mercury from the coal industry, what it did, how it's spewing into the air, and all the mercury we put in people's teeth. Mm-hmm. Mercury and GMO foods were like the death of that century, because yes. It's so devastating to learn these things, but also to have to live in the world without feeling like there's a lot you can do about it, especially when you're breathing in, whether you want to or not. You don't really have a say about the coal industry spewing mercury in, or the radiation that's spilling into the air and the waters and, poisoning our environment. There's not a lot, you don't feel like there's a lot you can do. At least with GMO corn, you could say, okay, I'm going to eat organic, but that's the tip of the iceberg, because it's still, they're feeding the animals, then we're eating the animals. It's in the water. It's
Indeed.
so depressing. It's so dangerous. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, about the not just the GMO corn. That's an issue, and I want to hear more about that. But the bigger also issue is our water and all the animals themselves who are being fed GMO corn and soy and all the other ones are so toxic that now when people are eating them, they're loading themselves up with these poisons, not just the animal themselves.
This is true. Meat also carries a toxic chemical burden because the animals have eaten feed that is GMO and pesticide rich, let's put it this way. And it builds up in their bodies. And so, yes, when you eat meat from a conventionally reared and fed farm animal, that's definitely a source of these pesticides as much as eating the plant directly itself. And although we're going to be focusing on Roundup today, I do want to mention at this point that it's the cocktail of chemicals that I believe is really causing the damage. We're ingesting tens of different pesticides every day in a regular conventional diet. And these, for me, are having additive, if not synergistic effects, even if they are present at low doses, which regulatory agencies such as the EPA say are safe. But there is increasing evidence to show that very low doses, well below what regulatory agencies around the world say are safe, can still cause harm, especially on a long-term basis, through mechanisms such as hormone system disruption, endocrine disruption.
Yeah, and I know I heard you in an article or an interview that I watched that you did. You said that, I think it was Germany, you said that the dairy cows in Germany had 20 parts per billion of glyphosates in their urine. Is that true? I think it was a lecture you did in Australia.
Yes. I was reviewing the studies conducted by Monica Kruger in Germany, where she's a veterinarian, and so therefore she was looking at farm animal levels of glyphosate residues in farm animals. And one of for me, her most telling study was that she found comparable amounts of glyphosate in the urine and in the various tissues, organs of the dairy cows, suggesting that there was a buildup of the glyphosate within the bodies of these animals. But of course, anybody eating the steak from these animals or whatever,
Right. Or the milk.
the milk, possibly too. She didn't actually analyze the milk in that one particular study, but certainly if you're eating the meat of these animals, you'd be getting quite a hefty dose of the glyphosate from that too.
Well, and things concentrate, right? You have it in the plant and then the cow eats it, it concentrates in all their tissues.
Well, that's a possibility. Again, a really proper study to look at that possibility hasn't been conducted. So we're still getting the official line that we're getting about glyphosate is that it does not bioaccumulate, i.e. our bodies excrete it very quickly and it doesn't build up in our body. But actually, the proper studies to demonstrate whether that's the case or not, in my view, have simply not been done. So it's largely an assumption.
Yeah, I see. Well, as a professional golfer, and golf courses use glyphosates like crazy, as you can imagine. And that was one of that was one of the main reasons I left. I got really sick from all the pesticides and I was just sick all the time. And I had a bad back. And so it forced me to leave the tour and retire. But I became immediately super interested in detoxing because I knew I'd been exposed to so much Roundup. And, Roundup is just used all over. And I know there's different levels in different countries that are allowed, but I know America is one of the countries that allow the most. It's so sad to say. But tell us a little bit about glyphosates and about their implications on us.
Yes, the glyphosate-based herbicides are the most widely used pesticides in the world. and their use has increased enormously, exponentially, since the mid-90s with the introduction of GMO crops that have been engineered with a soil bacterium that makes them resistant, tolerant to being sprayed with the glyphosate-based herbicides such as Roundup. So the farmer can spray the crop, it survives, but the Roundup kills the weeds. Good for the farmer, but perhaps not so good for the consumer, because it means that what's been happening in the intervening years is that the residue levels of glyphosate-based herbicide in the food supply has been growing and growing and growing. And in response to that, what the regulator has done, rather than to test whether these increasing levels of exposure are potentially harmful, what we've seen is the permitted residue levels have been raised, so that somehow, without doing any work to show whether it's safe or not, higher permitted levels have been allowed, although no evidence to show whether that high permitted level of daily ingestion is actually safe or not. So we have the situation now where it does vary from territory to territory around the world, but we do have what I feel are relatively high permitted residue levels of daily ingestion. Residue levels in food are high. Like, for example, I believe in soybeans in the United States, 50 parts per million, 50 milligrams per kilogram. This is permitted. And this is really, you can find samples without those sorts of levels in certain parts of the world.
And if you consider that soy is in every food these kids eat, all the processed food has soy something in it, and not that I believe soy is a bad food, but you can get organic sprouted soy and it can be healthy. But when you're talking about soy, like you're talking about GMO soy, which they put in everything from salad dressings to anything, and these kids at these schools are getting all this processed food, and they're just consuming such high levels.
Indeed. The daily ingestion, when you look at the levels, when you measure glyphosate ingestion by looking at measuring the amount in urine of people, in the from the limited, there haven't been that many surveys, but you find roughly 8 to 10 times more glyphosate in the urine of American citizens than you do in Europe, where we don't grow GMOs.
And we can't even label GMO foods in America. I mean, it's so corrupt that we can't even put on the label that it's, contains GMO. That whole argument.
Yep,
and
I certainly do.
That was such a nightmare. All the ads at the last minute, even in California, it was going to pass, and then billions of dollars were put into these ads trying to say, oh, you're going to make the farmers all lose their jobs. And people thought they were voting the other way, but the way they made the ads, they confused people. So then they voted to save the farmers' jobs, and that was voting for GMOs. I mean, it's really corrupt here. And I hate to think that America is one of the worst countries, but I know it is, because we don't even allow our food to have labels on it. That's how sad it is.
It is indeed. The United States is totally out of step with the rest of the world regarding the labeling of GMO foods. Just about everywhere else there is a reasonably good labeling law, like we have in the European Union, that GMOs and GMO derived ingredients such as oil need to be labeled if they are present.
And which country is the worst in allowing the highest levels of glyphosates?
Oh, the United States, by far.
Really? Jeez.
Yeah, just to give you some numbers on that. In the European Union, we've got one of just about the lowest permitted daily, what we call acceptable daily intake. In the European Union, it's permitted to 0.3 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. 0.3 milligrams. 0.3 milligrams is 300 micrograms per kilogram of body weight per day. So somebody like myself, I weigh around 60 kilograms. If you do the sums, I can ingest roughly 20 milligrams a day. According to the regulators here in the European Union, I could ingest around 20 odd milligrams, thousandths of a gram. A milligram is a thousandth of a gram. I can ingest around 20 thousandths of a gram of glyphosate every day in, day out. And my regulator here says I'll be absolutely fine. In the United States, for some reason, I can ingest almost 6 times that amount and I'll still be safe. Now, and these figures are supposed to have been arrived at using the same data, the same background kind of safety evaluation data. So how one region can arrive at one value, which is almost 6 times lower than another, is still a mystery to me, but nevertheless, that's the situation. Maybe I like to almost like joke and say, maybe the American regulators think that Americans are much more hardy people and that they can ingest higher amounts of things without getting sick. But I
don't think so. This year, that was the first year ever that they came out and they lowered our life expectancy. So maybe that's why. I mean, obviously, I think the answer is very clear: money, 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 money. And this is sadly the case in America that, they're making billions of dollars at the cost of our own health. And it's why someone like me feels like I need to stop my practice and get the word out about health, because people are just being used for the dollar. And, so you die of cancer, you're one person. They don't really care. But, if you don't know what to do, or if you don't understand what you're eating, and you can't play stupid anymore, it just doesn't work, because you'll just die from it. So you might as well take responsibility for your health and learn all you can and try to eat around the poisons if it's even possible. But you certainly can do better than not knowing and just eating processed GMO foods. That's already super dangerous. So I'm appalled that America's so far behind all the other countries. And I know Europe has so much stricter laws, and it's just but I know it's still probably an issue even at that level, isn't it? Aren't you seeing health implications there even at that low level?
Yes, absolutely. There is evidence, quite a lot of evidence to show that glyphosate can be toxic below regulatory set limits. That there is quite a lot of evidence for that. But then there's another level altogether, Deborah, and that is what toxicity at a level that is typically ingested. And this is where, unfortunately, the studies are very few and far between. Ours is, to the best of my knowledge, the study the results of which we published recently, where rats were fed Roundup herbicide, Roundup weed killer, at an extremely low level, extremely low glyphosate level, were still getting sick when they consumed it over a 2-year period. Let me describe the study so you can appreciate what I'm saying better.
Okay.
There were basically rats, female rats, that one group was fed Roundup in the drinking water that was diluted at a level to give a glyphosate concentration that was about half what's permitted in European Union tap water, drinking water. And another group of rats were just normal water, and all of them, of course, on the same diet. And the rats consumed this over a 2-year period. Now, in terms of the daily intake of the glyphosate in these animals, they were ingesting 4 nanograms per kilogram body weight per day. What does that mean? A nanogram is 1,000th millionth of a gram. In other words, an extremely small amount. I mean, you would never see this. If you weighed out a nanogram, you'd be struggling to see the particle that it represents. So 4 nanograms, 4,000 millionth gram per kilogram of the body weight per day was ingested by these rats. Glyphosate was ingested by these rats. Now, just to put this into, again, perspective of the regulatory approved levels, these rats were ingesting 75,000 times less glyphosate than what European Union regulators say is safe to consume on a daily basis. 75,000 times lower than the permitted levels. And you know, this is going to be staggering to you even more. The amount consumed by these rats was 437,500 times lower than what is permitted by agencies in the United States. So we're talking, this is why the title of our paper contains the term ultra low dose of Roundup. I intentionally use the term ultra low dose of Roundup because the glyphosate equivalent consumption was at these incredibly low levels. So the rats consumed this over 2 years. What was found were clear evidence. The initial data, the initial analysis of the organs of these animals was published by Professor Gilles Serolini in France. And what he found was that the livers, the blood and urine, and analyzing the biochemistry of the blood and the urine of these animals indicated liver and kidney damage. Wow. And when he looked at when he did sections, when he did microscopic analysis, histology, anatomical analysis of these organs, again, there was clear evidence that the levels of damage, levels of illness in these organs was escalated in the Roundup feeding group. So that was the initial finding published several years ago now.
Amazing.
What my group has done in the interim, we've taken this a step further. We've used cutting-edge molecular analytical methods, which are revolutionizing the way we do our research as well as our clinical diagnostic practices. In that we use initially we used a method known as transcriptomics. Transcriptomics. What this is looking at the profile, the patterns of gene function, the total, all the genes, the levels at which all the genes are working at. And so we took the livers and the kidneys from these rats and looked at the profile of the genes. Now, as we were touching on in the earlier part of our discussion, the profile of gene function is reflective of either health or a disease or a given disease. That we have clear databases that have this information there now from many, many years of research. And what we found was that when we looked at the profiles of the gene function in the livers and the kidneys from these Roundup treated animals compared to the controls, they were markedly disturbed. We found thousands of gene functions that were altered either up or down, and that when we scrutinized those changes, we could predict that what those changes reflected was that both the liver and the kidney were structurally and functionally damaged. They showed signs of necrosis, of death, of scarring, of fibrosis, and of damage through what we call oxidative damage, reactive oxygen damage. So that's what the gene expression patterns were predicting. These organs, the state of these organs, from this ultra low dose Roundup treatment group.
Amazing.
We took that one step further, and this is really what the clincher. The gene expression profiles are predictive. They don't give you a definitive representation of the composition of the organ. They're just telling you that based on this pattern of gene expression, gene function, they're saying, we expect the organ to be this way or that way. But what we did, however, was to follow up in order to confirm whether the gene expression profile was correct or not. We took the same liver tissues from these animals. We focused on the liver because that was the organ that showed the most harm, predicted to have the most harm. And we did what we called proteomics analysis. This is where we now look at the protein profile, the actual protein composition, all the different types, many of the different types of proteins that go to make up the liver. And then we also looked at the profile of the metabolites, the small biochemical molecules. Now, what is known as metabolomics analysis. Now, when you look at protein profiles and metabolite profiles, you're actually directly measuring the composition of the organ. So it's not predicting anymore. It's actually directly measuring the composition of the organ. And that is going to reflect its health or disease status. And in the paper that we published in January this year, our analysis of the protein profile, the proteomics profile, and the metabolomics profile very clearly confirmed, it actually confirmed beyond any shadow of a doubt that the livers from these ultra-low dose Roundup ingesting rats were highly damaged. And the most profound, when we looked at the disturbances in the protein and the metabolite profiles, what they were telling us was that the livers of these rats were suffering, these rats were suffering from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and the more severe fatty liver condition known as non-alcoholic steatohepatosis. And just to put that into perspective, 25% of Americans today and 20 to 30% of Europeans are suffering from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Wow.
Very, very serious.
That's astounding.
So what our study for the very first time has done, it has been able to show beyond what for us is beyond doubt, a direct causative link between an environmentally relevant level of Roundup ingestion and a serious disease. That has not been demonstrated before, with the emphasis here being on environmentally relevant level of ingestion. What can be expected to be consumed through contaminated drinking water. Having said that, and this is worrying again for me, for the American people, is that the level of glyphosate ingested by these rats showing the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is at least 1,000 times lower than what is typically being ingested by Americans today.
Unreal. Time to take your break and walk around and stretch. And I'd like to ask you guys to please keep sharing the show. It's getting easier and easier now to share podcasts because more and more people listen to podcasts. And even cars, they have that new Apple Play system in it. So it lets you just hit the podcast app from your screen now. So I just ask you guys to help me get the word out. We need everyone to know everything about how to heal themselves and how to live in a way that's going to give them the best quality of life. You guys know I want to reach millions because I want to help millions heal or get well. And I need your help. So if you love the show, please ask 3 friends to listen. And if they like it, then ask them to please review it. I know it's a pain to leave a review, but if you haven't left one yourself and you feel inspired by the show, then please do it and leave a review in iTunes. You guys know I'll love you forever for that. You can also support the show with donations. You can do that either directly from my website or by using the Amazon banner on my website. And all those purchases from your Amazon banner are private. I don't get to see what anyone buys or who buys. You just click on the link and it takes you right there. If you bookmark that page, You can then just click on your bookmark and it'll take you to Amazon each time via my link. And they just send me a little commission that really helps the show. So thanks so much for all of you that are doing that. I really appreciate it. Okay, now let's get back to the show. No wonder. I mean, I think the more I hear stuff like this, and just every year that I get older, I think I'm less shocked, because you're prepared for, hearing these kinds of things after being in the field as long as I have with health. But I'm more amazed that the human body can live even 60 years with all of this and everything else environmental and the way people eat and stress and everything we talked about that requires health. I mean, that's crazy that you're testing in the rats this low ultra dose level, and they're showing already damage and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And we're ingesting as Americans, but even as you said, in the European Union,
Yes.
they have a lower level, but it's still much more than you gave the rats. So
Much low, much.
I mean,
much
it's,
higher.
that's just how the human body is just, like you said, it's a slow poisoning. It's so sad. But I'm curious about, in specific, the corn. Is the GMO corn any worse than the other GMO crops? And let's start by saying this, in case people didn't know. Are there 7 or 8? I know the GMO crops, at least in America, are corn, soy, beets, papaya, canola, cotton. Am I right? Is there, and what am I missing?
That's pretty much it. The beets are, of course, sugar beet.
Yeah, sugar beets,
It's
right.
sugar beet. But yes, to this, your list is pretty. That's it. Yes, that's right. It's the soy, the corn, the canola, the cotton, the sugar beet, alfalfa. Did you mention
Alfalfa.
Alfalfa
No, I didn't.
as an animal feed only, though. The alfalfa that's grown is of the type that's harvested as an animal feed. And the papaya in Hawaii. Those are the major ones. Although you've just had launched, or about to be launched in the United States, new variety of GMO potato.
Right.
That's apparently small scale release in the American Midwest. This year it's about to happen, the first harvests. And also an apple, a variety of GMO apple, the Arctic apple.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah, and I like people to know the list, because those are the ones that are especially important to buy organic. So before you get onto the corn, maybe that would be a good next question is it true that buying organic, I am buying food that's GMO free?
Yes, in principle, that's absolutely right. The organic sectors, organic organizations around the world have all agreed that GMOs had no place in organic agriculture, and they have banned their use. So anything that is certified organic must be GMO free. Having said that, of course, the organic farms are surrounded by non-organic farms, GMO farms. And so unfortunately, it's not infrequent to find low level, and I do mean low level, of GMO and pesticide contamination even in organic products. But that's simply because the systems are just all there mixed up. Not that the organic farmer is intentionally using pesticides or GMOs. It's just that they cannot avoid the inadvertent mixing, contamination, because the systems are out in the fields mixed with each other. But absolutely right. If you want to absolutely minimize your ingestion of GMOs and pesticides, then eating organic, of course, is the only way, or growing your own.
Right. And what about cross-pollination in fields that GMO seeds blow in the wind and can cross-pollinate another organic, so eventually maybe that organic seed is now not what they thought it was? Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible, of course. You can have a GMO corn field and an organic corn field, and as long as they're within a certain distance, and that distance can be quite large, because obviously bees can spread pollen around many, many miles, but you can get an organic crop being contaminated by cross-pollination from a GMO field. That is possible for something that's open-pollinated, such as corn.
Yeah. Okay. And now about corn. So, what got you more focused on corn, and is corn worse than the others?
No, I'm not saying that corn is worse than the others. It was just the opportunity became available to my group, again, through a collaboration with Professor Gilles-Éric Seralini in France, where he grew GMO corn, Roundup tolerant. So this is a GMO corn. It's called NK603 variety, which has been engineered to withstand being sprayed with Roundup, like the soy, like the majority of the soy that's grown.
Isn't it true now they're having a spray in addition to the GMO seed?
Oh, well, yeah, that's another interesting issue. Yes, indeed. Because of the incessant, repeated use of Roundup year in, year out since the introduction of GMOs, tolerant to this herbicide, the American fields are now absolutely rampant with Roundup resistant weeds. And the only way that farmers are now trying to control this is by mixing other herbicides, other even more toxic herbicides in their tanks, along with the glyphosate, such as 2,4-D and dicamba, to name a couple. And so now what we're faced with is the population is going to get exposed to not just the Roundup in large amounts, but an ever-increasing amount of 2,4-D and dicamba, with the consequences of which, of ingesting this mixture, are totally unknown because it's never been evaluated. So that's the situation that we're faced, and it's going to get worse because the industry's response to glyphosate resistance in the weeds populations, and there are more than 30 different varieties, by the way, that are out there now, literally infesting American fields. They've released companies like DuPont, Dow, and Monsanto have released crop varieties that are not only resistant to glyphosate, but also to dicamba or to 2,4-D. So we've got double herbicide tolerant GMOs out there in the fields now. And so this is why we're going to inevitably see a massive escalation in the exposure levels to not only glyphosate, but also to 2,4-D and dicamba and other herbicides as well.
Jeez. And, I know like you live in London, I live in LA, where they're big cities. I'm sure you have pretty good access to organic foods.
Indeed.
But do most people in countries have access to organic foods, or is this becoming a bigger problem because they may not have that choice?
Yeah, your guess is as good as mine, really, in terms of the status of the organic sector. As you say, you and I are fortunate to have access to good supply, good variety of organic foods. Of course, not even within the UK. I'm lucky in London.
Yeah, right.
Because we have such a great market. But if I was to be in a more provincial area, maybe I won't be so fortunate.
Right. Do you guys have chance to eat organic out at restaurants? Do you have many restaurants that serve organic food now?
Very few, I'm sorry to say. Very few indeed.
That is the sad part, isn't it?
That is
because
the sad
at least
part.
in LA, we're getting, I probably have now 5 or 6 I can choose from, but it's LA, it's a big city, but
Yeah.
I don't go out to eat anymore unless I can, unless I have to, like if I'm out of town or something like that, then of course, but I try always when I'm in LA, we only go to places, the 5 or 6 that we know that are organic and of course vegan or have vegan options. So that's really where it really needs to grow, because people think that they eat healthy, but they don't realize how many times a week they're eating out, and every one of those meals are having something GMO in it or Roundup in it or something.
Many other pesticide residues will be there for sure. So, but we do the best we can. We buy any organic we can find and go to farmers markets where you can buy directly from an organic farmer. These are the sorts of things that we do in London, and I'm sure you do over on the West Coast there too. And we do the best we can and just reduce our ingestion levels as much as can. Although I have an interesting story in that. I know that, as I say, in Europe, our glyphosate levels are much lower than the United States by 10 times. I had my urine tested. After having spent a week in California, last year, in January, I have a colleague at UCSF in San Francisco who I've been working with on glyphosate surveys. And so he's developed a very good assay for analyzing glyphosate in human urine. So I gave him a urine sample, and I came back with a typical glyphosate level for Americans.
Wow.
So in other words, in just 1 week, having spent just 1 week in the United States, I was Americanized with respect to my with respect to my glyphosate level in my urine. I was Americanized. I was shocked.
Oh my gosh. Maybe that can explain some of the crazy violent behavior we're getting these days. If
Possibly.
you would have stayed longer, you'd have come home and began to act a lot different too. But
yeah, it maybe. But
wow, that's crazy in 1 week.
1 week. That's very true. But getting back to your question about the corn, as I say, I through my collaboration with Professor Gilles Seralini, who grew GMO corn for a rat feeding study, he had the corn samples, the GMO and non-GMO equivalent, near equivalent, genetically near equivalent. They'd both been grown very close to each other under the same conditions, so the environmental differences were neutralized. And I was curious to know whether the GM process had disturbed the composition of the corn. And so we did this molecular profiling, the same molecular profiling that I mentioned we did to the livers and the livers of the rats. We did the same compositional molecular profiling in terms of the protein profile and the metabolite profile of the GMO corn and compared it to the non-GMO. And we had corn that had been sprayed with Roundup, and the GMO corn samples that had been sprayed with Roundup, and a sample that had not been sprayed with Roundup. And what our protein and metabolite profiling clearly showed, very, very clearly showed that the genetic engineering process had markedly changed the protein and metabolite profile. We had tens of different protein changes, actually hundreds of different protein changes and tens of different metabolite changes, which indicated that there was a disturbance in the energy metabolism of the corn. So we don't know what that means in terms of the crop performance, but clearly the energy metabolism of the corn was not as healthy, not as good as the non-GMO. And we also found there were elevations in potentially substances that in certain contexts can be toxic. These are substances known as polyamines. Polyamines can be protective in certain contexts, but they can be damaging in other contexts. And I'm not saying that this this makes this corn toxic. What our data beyond doubt shows is that the GM process, through what we were discussing earlier, the fact that you're bringing about new combinations of genes, you have a mutagenic effect. You're damaging on the gene. You're damaging on the gene structure and function in the crop, has brought about this altered biochemistry. So there is no way, unlike what is claimed by industry and regulators, there is no way that this GMO is substantially equivalent to the non-GMO. No way.
No way. And that's enough proof for me to stay away from it. But sadly, they work so hard, they have so much money to prove the other side. And there's a lot of lies or myths, but also flat out lies. Like some of them are saying that they're safe to eat, that they're regulated, they increase yields, they reduce pesticide use, they benefit farmers and make their lives easier, they help with climate change, they help feed the world. I mean, a lot of these are just outright lies, but how does someone know that if that's what their own government or agencies are telling them? Because you can go on the internet and you can find both sides.
Absolutely right. It's very difficult for the general public, really, because obviously, given the vast resources of industry and the fact that governments generally back industry on this subject of GMO crops, what the information that gets out to the public is dominated by those who are in favor, the advocates in the use of the technology and all of these hyped up claims, which are not backed by any scientific evidence whatsoever. So it is very difficult, which is why I'm glad that people like yourself, Deborah, are out there putting out these podcasts so that people can have as many, yet another source. They can hear our discussion and they can hear that there is another side to this.
Well, that's
story.
the most important thing. It's never like to impose my view on others, but to expose people. It's like when I had my practice, people would say, should I vaccinate my children? That's not a question I can answer, even legally for them. But what they're going to hear is only the side from the doctor who hasn't even studied the other side. They haven't even really spent much time even looking into the other side. So my job is to expose them to the other side, give them my information, good books, resources, people to listen to, books to read. And if they would ask me, would you do it? That's a different story. I could answer that question. But in the end, you just want to educate people because ultimately we have to all live and die with our choices. And if we don't hear the other side, then we're not even making a choice. We're just basically being brainwashed and just following, somebody's advice that we haven't even thought about. And that's just can't do that anymore in this lifetime.
Very true. What you've just described is that we're not living in a fair level playing field. It's heavily weighted on one side. And we try to get out our message. I get out my message. I allow my science to do the talking for me. I'm led by that evidence. If I did a study and found that Roundup was absolutely safe, I'd go out there and say it's absolutely safe. But that's not what my studies are showing. It's telling me that it can be highly toxic, even at low doses and given a long enough time of ingestion. So that's the message. I allow the science, as I'm sure you do, to lead for you and get that message out to the public and allow them to make an informed choice, which at the moment they're not capable of doing because they're not getting the information, the full side, the full story. They're just not getting it.
Right. So just a few quick questions, and then I'll let you go. But one is, do you think that corn, even not GMO corn, but just organic corn, do you think that it's been changed over the years so much that people can't eat it, or should people avoid corn in general? Or what are your feelings? Because I've heard that about corn and wheat both.
This is a good question. I can't really answer because I'm not an expert in how these crops have evolved and how their composition. Obviously, people have been breeding new varieties of wheat, corn, or every major crop. There are hundreds of different varieties, and there's new ones coming out all the time, being produced through natural crossbreeding programs, not through genetic engineering technologies, but just through natural breeding programs. And of course, with each new variety, the composition changes. You get new proteins appearing, levels of different proteins are changing. I can envisage, just hypothetically, that alterations in composition just through natural breeding programs could result in varieties that some people may not be able to tolerate. This could be true. But beyond that kind of speculative point, I can't make. But in connection with we've been talking a lot about glyphosate and Roundup. I should mention that Roundup is used not just on GMO crops that have been engineered to tolerate being sprayed with it. Roundup is used even in conventional farming and in crop situations with crops that are not GMO Roundup tolerant. So, for example, a field could be sprayed to kill weeds before you sow your wheat, for example. But most worryingly, and this is a very nasty habit that farmers around the world have got into, especially in Northern Europe and in the United States, is that on certain crops, within a few days of when they want to harvest, they spray the crop intentionally with Roundup to kill it. So our cereal crops, wheat, oats, barley, rye, certain varieties of pulses, bean varieties, they're sprayed with Roundup within a few days of harvest to intentionally kill the crop and therefore dry the seed more quickly, allowing the farmer to harvest sooner than they would normally.
Jeez, I've heard this. That is really scary that they're doing that. And it's not just GMO, so you're saying, but it's not done in organic. It's only done in non-organic.
It is the non-organic, non-GMO context we're talking about here. Definitely. Why is that a worry? Because you're harvesting just a few days after you've sprayed, which means that the residues haven't had a chance to dissipate. So this is why you very typically, if you survey foods derived from cereals such as wheat and oats, you will readily find glyphosate residues at, for me, shockingly high levels in some food products. And they can only be coming because of this practice of pre-harvest desiccation, or burn down as it's called, to dry the grain. I came across a couple of NGOs in the United States. A couple of NGOs did a survey of foodstuffs in the United States recently. It was the Food Democracy Now! And the Detox Project. They analyzed glyphosate residues in various cereal products. And I was shocked by the levels of glyphosate in the oat-derived cereals that they were finding more than 1 part per million in Cheerios.
Oh my God.
For example. Where is that glyphosate coming? The oats are not Roundup tolerant. They could only be coming from the oats being sprayed just before harvest.
Wow.
To kill it off, dry it off, to bring it in. And as a result, you end up with these very worrying, shockingly high levels of glyphosate in the foods that both children and adults are going to be consuming on a daily basis.
Well, I always wonder if the people who are not the farmers, but if the people that are behind this, like the Monsanto and the Dow Chemical and all these people, or the ones that are making all the money, I wonder if they eat their own chemicals. That would be like the ultimate revenge. Just eat your own foods if you think they're safe. Because I remember here in America when they had the Michigan water filled with lead, and they had the commissioner saying, no, it's totally safe to drink, although people were lighting a match to their sink and there was fire coming out of it and there was lead being proven every day and it wasn't even clear anymore. And so one of the moms took a big glass to the county commission meeting and said, you want us to drink it? Let's watch you drink this big glass of water. And he wouldn't do it.
So that's absolutely right. And it reminds me of a similar incident to one of the advocates of GMOs and Roundup called Patrick Moore. And again, on an interview in France, I believe, the person in the studio there, because he was saying just how safe it was, you can, he says, don't worry, you can drink this. It's perfectly safe. You can put it on your salad even. So he said to him, okay, you think it's safe? So he brought out a glass of Roundup there for him. He says, okay, then drink it. And of course he wouldn't do that. And they got into an argument and he just walked out. But it's hilarious. But I do wonder whether the producers of GMOs and of pesticides, whether they themselves in their own families, in their family homes, whether they are eating organic or not. It's one that we always amuse ourselves to discuss.
Exactly. But not even that. It's really true if you look in the industry, like people who work in the slaughterhouses, if they work in a chicken slaughterhouse, they don't feed their family chicken and they won't eat it because they know what goes in there. They know what happens. So sometimes that's like the best way to learn the truth. If you know anybody that sells that pesticide and they're not eating it, you don't need any further research. That's enough if you ask me. And then I wonder if there's anything people can do. Is there anything they can do to voice their disagreement? Is there anything they can do on a political level to help change the safety of our water and our food?
that again is a very good question. I'm not a kind of activist in that way, but the way I see my role, I do the science, and then whatever my results are, if they're showing evidence of harm, then I hope, in a way, wish people will use that evidence to challenge through their local, through the various systems. Now, I know people in the United States, for example, who start even locally. They've been able to get themselves persuade their local authorities to declare just their area locally a GMO and Roundup free zone. Mm-hmm. So you can work locally
that's usually
by
the
lobbying
best way.
your local, getting a local group and getting, obviously you need a lot of support. You need to, first of all, educate your local people and get their support en masse so that you can apply sufficient political pressure locally. Or you can join one of the many national organizations that are challenging the establishment on a national level at the EPA and the FDA.
Which has been abolished now in America.
Sadly.
Pretty much. Sadly. Oh, it's a horrid situation. I'm almost ashamed at this point what we allow, what we do just for the dollar. But, hopefully there's an end point of corruption. The truth ultimately has to prevail. Maybe it's not in my lifetime. Maybe it's many more, whatever years. But I still believe that eventually something has to completely collapse before it actually makes a change. And we're just getting closer, especially in America, with all we're doing and how many people we're killing and how toxic we're making our food and our water and our environment. It's just pushing that level where it's going to crash and is crashing. But it's sad to have to watch it.
I agree. It is sad for me to watch it because I have many wonderful friends in the USA and I really love the USA dearly. But it's very sad for me to see the horrible state it's got itself in regarding the health of the people. So I just hope, at the moment, the authorities, not just in the United States but elsewhere as well, are not responding to the escalating evidence of harm from pesticides and GMOs and their associated pesticides. So I feel that people have to take matters into their own hands. The legislation isn't being passed to protect them. So people have to embrace the knowledge for themselves and take matters into their own hands to protect themselves. And minimally, I hope the evidence that we as scientists provide, we hope that that's what people will do. But then, as I say, use that evidence nevertheless to put it under the noses, put it before the authorities and say, look at this. What are you going to, this is showing evidence of harm. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, right. And that's why I do what I do, because you do the research, I get the research out, let people know so at least they know what to do in their own life for themselves and their loved ones, and then they can take it locally, and then hopefully the movement grows, and it really has to become a movement for change. So that's really where it's at. And I just wonder if you feel at all hopeful to get out of this mess with our food and our water, or do you think it's kind of like always going to be there, or what's your thoughts on that?
Things are looking pretty bleak at the moment. But where I have to admit, and they look as if they may get worse before they get better. But where I take actually hope and which gives me an overall optimistic view is the way that I see people around the world, United States, Europe, they're waking up to these problems for themselves, thanks to material being put out by people like yourself, Deborah. There is information there, and they are seeing it, and they're waking up to the problems because they feel themselves getting less well. They feel themselves getting more and more sick. Mm-hmm. They're seeing their children get sick. And they can see that the conventional pharmaceutical approach at best only covers up symptoms and normally can frequently make the condition worse. And then they find that if they then go to naturopath doctors or people like yourself or doctors that are using lifestyle, they call it lifestyle medicine, and they see themselves and their children getting better, and that word spreads. I see this organic. This is what's given me encouragement that there is this thing is growing organically, and the pun. But I see this like an organically growing movement of people just waking up, and I do in the longer term future. I feel things will the tide will turn. I can't say when, because there is a great deal of entrenchment because of the huge commercial vested interest to keep things as they are. So I don't know, but the people ultimately carry the ultimate power. They're the ones with the buying power. They're the ones that can choose to buy the pesticide-laden conventional food or organic food. So I feel that with the awakening that I'm seeing within the populations in different countries, that the future prospects are I can see brightness. There is a bright side to this too that's going on.
I agree with all of that. The movement is growing, and I tell my listeners in the show all the time that I want to make this a movement to teach you how to learn how to heal yourself with natural remedies, homeopathy, diet, lifestyle medicine, and listen to all the shows, because eventually you're going to learn so much of what you can do yourself. It needs to become a movement. You speak with your dollar. If you don't buy that GMO food, guess what? Eventually it's not going to be there, or it can't be there in the numbers that it is, because if you're not buying it. But sadly, I also know how affordable they make those kind of foods, and how so many people in America are struggling financially. The rich are getting richer, the poor get poorer. It's so much more expensive to buy a broccoli than it is a whole meal at McDonald's. It's really become unfortunate, but this is how they're getting people to buy their food. They're just making the healthier food unaffordable, and the others less and less and less and less. And so sadly, the people who have the least amount of income seem to feel like they can only afford, GMO food. But I try to tell people all the time, you just have to look. If you can't buy all organic, then pick the crops that are not GMO, and, use only your organic as the GMO. But then also think about like strawberries, that pesticide sprayed right on the fruit you're eating. So don't do that one. Better off doing an avocado with a skin, because it has at least a thick skin. So I just try to teach people, because we have to meet everyone where they're at. Not everyone can afford to do it all the right way, but everyone can afford to make some changes.
Absolutely right. This is wonderful. I'm so glad to hear these things. It again just encourages me and inspires me further. We do the best we can because we can make some things that will significantly improve our lives. Even a few things can significantly change. And ultimately, the most expensive thing in life, actually, you say, the organic foods can be much more expensive compared to McDonald's meal. But the thing that is most expensive in life is falling ill.
Yes, for sure.
Sickness is the most expensive thing, and the one that, of course, undermines our happiness the most. So it's worth spending the money on the organic rather than, say, on a latest mobile phone model or something.
For sure. I always say what I spend on my food is my real health insurance. My other one is my sick insurance. But what I spend on my food is my health insurance. And I have a friend who struggles, doesn't make a lot of money, and she always says, no money, no honey. And then I say, no health, no life.
That's very, very true. That's a great, great motto to lead one in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to let you go on that note. I really want to say thank you. But before you go, tell people how they can follow your work. Do you have a Facebook, Twitter, a website, or any place that they can follow any articles or research you're doing?
I think they should just simply search for my name. Unfortunately, I don't have time to engage on social media as much as I'd like to. So what they should simply do is to go into Google and just put my name in, and GMO, Roundup, glyphosate, use these kinds of search terms, and they will find, they have to warn them, they're going to get tens of thousands of hits. So, because there's a lot of things out there with that I'm connected with on these issues, but they'll be able to find some very good articles. They can go into YouTube. You found the recording of one of my Australia tour presentations. They can go into YouTube and find presentations that I've made in there too. That will be informative. So search for me that way, and you'll keep abreast of what's coming out of my research group.
Okay, perfect. And I know that's how I found you. My friend, Dr. Reese, sent me an article that you wrote on the GMO corn study that you did. And I was like, great, because I really wanted to talk to somebody about that. And so I really appreciate, I know you're a busy professor at London, and I just thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. It's been great talking to you.
It's really been my pleasure, Deborah, and I wish you and all your listeners, all that will listen in, the very best of health and happiness.
Great. Thanks, Michael. We'll talk soon.
I hope so. All the best now.
Wow, how sad, how terribly sad that we're at the point that so many people in our world can only afford to buy this poisoned food to eat. And that's only because it's subsidized and they make it cheaper than a head of broccoli, of course. That's because they want you to buy that poison. And then you'll get sick. And guess what? Then you get to fill the pockets of the pharmaceutical industry and trying to get well. What a mess. But you guys know we're always going to look at the positive side. And the positive side is that you all now know the truth, and you are not going to spend your dollars supporting GMO industry or GMO foods. If you can't buy organic or grow your own food or shop at your local farmer's market, then buy the foods that have thick skins that are non-organic. And anytime you need to buy a food where you're going to actually eat the berry or the leaf itself, like berries or lettuce, then you really must buy organic foods. You can go on the internet and you can put in something like top 10 dirty list or something like that. And they will tell you what are the most important foods to buy organic. If that's what you can afford to buy organic for now, do it. Okay, I don't want to keep you guys any longer, but I think you know how I feel, at least by now. I'm really happy that I could share the truth with all of you, and I feel happy that I use my own money to buy the best quality food, and that's because I see it as my true health insurance. That other insurance that breaks my bank every month, that's my sick insurance, but my food, that's my health insurance. So remember that. And remember my line, no money, no honey, but no health, no life. Yep, that's really how it goes. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the show today. You know what time it is, right? It's time to say goodbye. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a non-GMO organic plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace, be healthy, be free, live life.